Welcome to my work, the world of a medical laboratory scientist. Health is wealth, knowledge is power. GM food and longevity. When we talk of GM food, we are saying genetically modified food. And these are recent developments in order to create more healthy society. But how has it affected longevity? To understand GM food modification, you need to look at what could happen since the effect is from the basis, trying to use the DNA of another species to affect the DNA of your crops, your seeds, so that when it's now germinating and producing the hybrid could be resistant to certain diseases. So it helps the body, and it can even provide some nutrients that are deficient in the environment. So these are all what the GM aims at, the GM food aims at. But in reality, that is why it is necessary to study what has been the effect of GM food on our lifespan. That is what I am trying to do in this comparative analysis of countries. GM food starts around 1994 or thereabout, and when you now try to compare the 1980s experience of lifespan with the experience right now, we will be able to say that there is a difference, a significant difference, but we cannot pinpoint because the longevity in itself is a multifactorial thing. It is something that you cannot pin on one factor. But if we are able to get, there is a relationship between GM food and longevity, whether it's inverse or is directly proportional, well, then we can say with a little confidence that it is a factor. And when you are accepted that it's a factor in contributing to what could happen, then it becomes a risk factor that you can highlight if it affects lifespan, it shortens lifespans. So these study comparative analysis that I am trying to expose to you is just to let us know why some people who are skeptical about GM food are right or wrong. Also, the laboratory efforts that the medical laboratory scientists can do shall be examined. The kind of medical test on health issues could be examined to help us get at the truth of the whole discussion. This you shall see in the slide section. As we move on into the slide section, like I usually say, click the like button, subscribe, and more experience of this comes to you. The outline, objective introduction, GMO producers and consumers, research findings, laboratory diagnosis, and finally conclusion. The objective, to do a comparative analysis of the life expectancy of the highest producers and consumers of GM food with the least producers and consumers of GM food, and also exposing the role of the medical laboratory scientists on health issues for a higher life expectancy. The introduction. Food consumption has a direct causal relationship with ill health and also with longevity due to factors such as socio-economic status, education, age, and location. Contaminated food, either by microbes, toxin, or chemical poison, on the other hand, can cause ill health that could be fatal if not treated on time. A balanced diet contains carbohydrate, protein, fat, vitamins, minerals, and fibers in appropriate proportion, and these may not be present in the resource-poor countries, and it's very necessary to support increased lifespan. But when there is a deficiency that is common in resource-poor countries, life expectancies is decreased. Unhealthy diet, high in saturated fat, sugars, and sodium, combined with low fibers intake, directly cause non-communicable diseases like obesity, diabetes, cardiovascular disease, which are chronic diseases that are much associated with GM food. GM foods are food produced from organisms that have had changes introduced into their DNA using various methods of genetic engineering that allow the introduction of new traits like resistance to pathogen and herbicide, which allow also for better nutrient profile. These are all that are added to make the GM food very supportive of rapid growth. GM livestock like salmon fish has been developed since 2015. They are all meant to enhance survival and production capacity, especially with climate change experience. There is a scientific consensus that currently available food derived from GM crop poses no greater risk to human health than conventional food, and that's the study by Nicholas et al. As listed above. However, my study used metabolic syndrome as the health index in comparing the average lifespan and the other factors as listed in Wikipedia. Now let's look at producer and consumers. United States is top the list of high producer and consumer of these GM crops with 74.4 million hectares. The Brazil is next, Argentina, China, and Canada. And when you look at their production level, you can confirm that it's very, very high. Now we have the countries with the lowest consumption of genetic modified food. You will find the European Union, because of their ban and restriction, countries like France, Germany, Australia, Greece, Hungary, Italy, and Poland do not encourage it. Russia has strict comprehensive ban too on the cultivation and import of most GM food. Asia countries like Turkey, Latin America countries like Peru, Ecuador, Venezuela, and Belize. Then you have Japan being the one that I will use in comparison with life expectancy, having also not a complete ban, but consumers are resistant to it, very extremely resistant. Now the research talks about comparing the life expectancy in high consumer countries and low consumer countries. The high consumer countries are USA, Brazil, Argentina, and you find that they have, this country have high rate of GM crops adoption, soy, corn, canola, and widespread consumption of processed food. So you can understand what is processed food is highly indicated in obesity and other metabolic syndrome problems. But regardless of that, life expectancy in these countries is generally high, heavily influenced by factors such as healthcare quality, lifestyle, and income level. But when you compare their life expectancy with low restricted GM consumption countries, for example, Japan, Switzerland, and many European nations, these countries often have strict regulation, and their life expectancy, for example, Japan, is 85 years, higher than that of the US and these other countries. So I shall now go into the nitty-gritty of this life expectancy with the next slide, but you may want to exclude other factors like high intake of fruits, vegetable, has been responsible for these low restricted GM consumption countries' higher life expectancy. Now, the research findings let's look at and compare the countries, the life expectancies when there was no GM food in the 80s with their life expectancy when the GM food came into operations in the countries that are producing it. Japan in the 80s and before the COVID-19 pandemic. So Japan in the 80s, life expectancy at birth was approximately 76.1 years. And in 1985, Japan life expectancy rose to about 77.6. In 1989 to 1990, by the end of the decade, Japan life expectancy reached 78.5. The US was approximately 75.1 to 75. So the difference in the life expectancy when you look at the US in 1980, 85 and in 89, 1990, the difference is not more than 2 or 3 when you just add less than 3 difference between the two countries. But by the time you now add the period of this GM food production, Japan went up to 84.7 average, while the gap between Japan life expectancy and United States expectancy is widened almost like 8 units or 10 hits. When you had 8 to 84, you are 8 to 76, you are getting 84. So it's as wide as that. The gap in number of years that the difference in life expectancy was widening, and you can assume that the rate at which people consuming this GM in high production area was affecting their life expectancy. Now to metabolic syndrome. The syndrome shows a cluster of conditions which include abdominal obesity, high blood pressure, high blood sugar, and high triglyceride, especially the blood cholesterol. And this would define if it increases during this period as more or less a result of high consumption of food, because that is calories. They are all calorie problems. So, but if you now look at United States, how it affected United States between the 1980 and 2019, driven primarily by rising obesity. So it really caused serious obesity between the period. The prevalence rose by over 35% between 1988 and 2012 alone, with the trend continuing towards higher, though sometimes fluctuating, level near 2019. In summary, metabolic syndrome increased by over 35% in prevalence, rising from roughly 1 in 4 adults in the late 1980s and to over 1 in 3, almost like every adult. When it comes to 1 to 2, you look at 2 people, you say one of them is obese. That shows that the high consumption could be responsible for that. I'm sure, because when you talk of high calories, you are talking of food intake, and that is where the high production of GM food really comes into recognition. Yeah, since we agree that it's high calorie intake, that is calorie dense, nutrient poor food that really cause metabolic syndrome, the test to do will have to examine for those signs that and symptoms that really you will observe in the laboratory, especially the liver, non-alcohol fatty liver disease, and the fatty liver disease as well. You do the histology looking for fat droplets. You can do enzyme tests on the liver and also the liver fat image. Heart diseases, you check for the low cholesterol, triglycerides, and atherosclerosis plaque. Stroke, there are things you thickness you check for, and then the inflammation marker, C-reactive protein. Metabolic system, you can also do insulin resistant tests and fasting blood glucose. These are things that one should check for, especially when you are not sure whether what you are taking in is more of a GM food, because it contains no label and you can never be sure. Finally, conclusion. Prevention is better than cure. From the evidence increase in obesity of countries that are high consumers and high producers of the GMO, and also the increased metabolic syndromes observed within the period of its approval of the GMO in the country and production in that country, one has no other choice than to support its ban and encourage the Mediterranean lifestyle diet that is associated with increased longevity. However, since there is no way of knowing most GM food without reading their labels, the medical laboratory services should be of great importance and should be very accessible for screening and monitoring of non-communicable diseases that have now assumed epidemic proportion. You never can tell. The food may be available, but overindulgence is another thing. The change of lifestyle is also very necessary. Exercise is also very, very important. Then the antioxidants, all these vitamins that are lacking and minerals are very necessary to maintain a long lifespan, that is higher lifespan than probably what one will get if you don't take all these precautions. So you can watch more videos on my YouTube channel. There are so many, it's inexhaustible. Thank you.